Say one other thing. President Harris said today in her post, in her speech, she said that President Trump was going to turn the U.S. military against the American public and use the public to promote his agenda. How many of you think that is true? Well, what's interesting to me is that the Biden-Harris administration has done something 2 weeks ago that has never been done in American history, which is to send exactly lethal force, to send a directive to the Pentagon, changing the law to make it legal for the U.S. military to use lethal force against American citizens on American soil. Technically, now it's legal for the U.S. military under this directive. It will become legal for the U.S. military to shoot and kill Americans who engage in political protests because they disagree with policies in the White House. I'm not making this up. Any of you can look it up. This is a Democratic initiative. This did not come during the Trump administration. This did not come from Donald Trump. It came from the Democratic Party. And that's why I left the Democratic Party.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to Joshua Michael Not Compliant America. It is October 26, 2024, and we have a jam-packed show for you today. Trump went on Joe Rogan yesterday and broke the internet. It's absolutely blowing up, a 3-hour interview, and then went on to do another rally that evening. And the guy is just slaying everywhere, working 24 hours a day around the clock, trying to secure this presidential election. I want to talk about some of the behind-the-scenes stuff going on and some major roadblocks that might be coming in the next couple weeks. We have RFK talking about the gear up that the Democrats are now officially initiating the full takeover of the coup and threatening the American people and allowing to use lethal force against Americans. What are they planning? What kind of false flag black swan event are they planning in order to create chaos? Because there seems to be right now, a massive amount of unity right now rallying behind the Republican Party and Trump. Now, say what you want about Trump. People are setting their differences aside and understanding, like Elon Musk, like Joe Rogan, like all of these other people. They're setting all their differences aside. We can have debate. We can have conversations on how the country should be run. But when the country is being absolutely decimated through immigration, through the economy, through bad trade deals, through all the illegal immigration going on, and the massive crime spike and crime wave, we need to preserve the country before we can have a conversation on how to run the country. And people like RFK have come out and they're talking about that. They're able to do and set their differences aside. So I want to play some clips from the Rogan interview because I thought it was really powerful and there were some key points in there. But I also want to talk about the BRICS summit that just finished in Russia this past week and what that's going to mean for the monetary system. I also want to talk about the cyber threats and cyber attacks. As of last night on Friday, the FBI and Infrastructure Security Agency, CISA, said that the Chinese are aggressively trying to hack and attack our telecom networks. Now, we knew this was going to come. We knew this is the October surprise, potentially going to run in collaboration with this upcoming Black Swan event. But let's dive into it. They're stating that the FBI and CISA are aggressively investigating an attempted mitigate breach linked to the CCP, the Chinese Communist Party. Agencies across the U.S. government are collaborating to aggressively mitigate this threat. Now, What does this mean? Reading between the tea leaves of what this actually means. Does that mean just like the FBI oversees the cartels and their drug running operations through the border, and they still let it happen, they simply are quote unquote mitigating it and managing it? And we can see this through all different types of movies. There's a movie, great movie with Tom Cruise called All American, I think is what it's called, or All American. But it breaks down how the U.S. government and different branches, corrupt branches of the government, were actually orchestrating the drug operations and the quote-unquote war on drugs, right? That gives them funding to be able to fight the war on drugs. Well, now we have the war on terrorism, the war on all of these things. We see that they just simply use it so they can shuffle government funds to their nonprofits and NGOs and corporations to be able to justify making money. Now they have the boogeyman, and they have an excuse to oversee, and they'll say, "Hey, we're working on it. We're trying to mitigate it." But in so many instances, you can go all the way back to Pearl Harbor. A lot of people speculate that Pearl Harbor they let happen as an excuse to get into World War II. Just like 9/11 was a NATO operation written in 1997. I know Michael Moore went through that in great detail, talking about that, and look at what war that created, the excuse that they had in order to do that. In order to go to war with Afghanistan and the boogeyman, Osama bin Laden, who's directly connected to the Bush administration, they basically demolished those buildings and had a catastrophic event to justify and charge people up to go into war. You can go all the way to October 7th in Israel. Now we know that the intelligence, one of the best intelligence agencies in the world at the IDF, they knew that this was going to happen. One of the most protected countries in the world that, you have to serve 2 years in the military. Everybody does. And they had helicopters, they had a response. They were stood down for 7 hours to let that happen. But now you see the escalation happening with Iran and Israel and what that's going to lead into, and the allying that's happening with Russia, Iran, now North Korea and China. And all this plays in with what's going on with the BRICS and the monetary system and all of that. So it's all connected. It's all connected. All wars are bankers' wars. Remember that. So the two agencies, back to the cybersecurity thing, said that the affected companies have been notified and provided with technical assistance. No group has yet come forward to claim responsibility for the attack. The specific details of its nature have not been made public. Okay, so there's this potential boogeyman out there, but we're seeing Experian, the DMVs, we're seeing all these hackings going on, which they're priming the pump to justify and set the stage for when a cybersecurity attack happens, like CrowdStrike did, which was simply just a beta test, if you ask me, to get people ready and see and check the responses for when they do this on election day or leading up or immediately following their cyber blackouts, cyber outages. You're not going to be able to communicate with people. And now what's that going to do? That's going to create fear. That's going to create chaos. It's also going to allow some of these subgroups and these operative groups to set up and launch their black swan events. You're not going to be able to decipher what's happening around you. You're not going to know. You're not going to get your Twitter updates or your X updates because your infrastructure potentially is not going to work. Now you see how they're laying this out. What a perfect opportunity to say this. In response to the reports that Donald Trump and J.D. Vance may have been targets of this latest attack, Russia hoax 2.0, the Trump campaign spokesperson Stephen Chung issued a statement. This is a continuation of the election interference by Kamala Harris and Democrats who will stop at nothing, including emboldening China and Iran attacking critical American infrastructure to prevent President Trump from returning to the White House. Interesting how they are pointing out the fact that the Kamala Harris and the Democrats are potentially behind this hoax and or legitimate attack. They don't know. They continue. Their dangerous and violent rhetoric has given permission to those who wish to harm President Trump. Tech companies and security analysts have warned for some months of the threat of a cyber attack during the election. There it is. In August, Microsoft's Threat Analysis Center reported that Iranian-linked hackers known as Mint Sandstorm targeted a high-ranking official with the U.S. presidential campaign. The Mint Sandstorm cyber attack was confirmed by the Trump campaign, which attributed to a breach to foreign sources hostile to the United States. The U.S. intelligence community recently warned that the cyber attacks could be used beyond the election. There it is. Now, this is coming out. This is by the Raw Egg Nationalist. Does great work. The U.S. intelligence community has recently warned that cyber attacks could be used beyond the election because, quote, they remain intent of fanning division narratives to divide Americans, to undermine Americans. Confidence in the U.S. democratic system and consistent with to perceive to be in their interest. A memo from the National Intelligence Council is here. I'm not going to read that. It's just a bunch of boring nonsense. But what does this mean? This means that they're setting the stage. They're anticipating a Trump victory, which by all means, if you have not voted yet, you need to vote. Every single person, vote like your life depends on it, because it does. Vote like your future depends on it, because it does. Now, there's already cheating that's going on as early voting is showing a Trump surge. On MSNBC, Michael Steele and Sanders sounded the alarm that the GOP steal of 2024 has already begun. So now they're gaslighting, stating that the Trump people are stealing the ballots when all the convictions, everything has been linked to the Democrats. So they're gaslighting. Just like they're stating that Trump wants to lock everybody up and lock up American citizens. Meanwhile, they literally signed a bill. They literally signed an order a few weeks ago, and thank God RFK talks about it, and he's getting it to Trump, about them actually anticipating civil unrest and having the ability to shoot and kill Americans on American soil, which has never been done in history. So if you think we're out of the woods, you think things are calm now, you think things are all peace, happy, love, no, they're gearing things up. They're gearing things up for the election. This coming week is going to be the craziest week to date with what's going on, because Trump is destroying everything. And I know everybody has Trump fatigue, you know, because he's everywhere. He's all the time. I was having a conversation with a Democrat buddy of mine. Great guy. He's a farmer. You know, all of his friends are Trump supporters. All of his friends are, conservatives and stuff. But he just can't get over the fact. And I had a conversation with him yesterday, and I was like, hey, you know, who are you going to vote for? And he said, George McGovern, which if you don't know who he is, he was an old candidate from like the 70s or 60s or something. And, he thinks it's funny, and I'm like, okay. But he loves RFK, and I think I've talked about him before. But I was asking him, he's like, I just get so sick of Trump doing all of these things all the time. And he's constantly in the news for tweeting at 3 o'clock in the morning. It just drives me crazy. He needs to be more statesman-like. He needs to be this. And I was just explaining to him how I said, is that Trump doing those things to bring them to the media forefront? Or is the media machine reporting on everything that they can think of and spinning it and lying and spinning it and creating the narratives? And there's a machine that's bombarding you with that information. So the reason you have that and you feel that way, don't you think that the media is more responsible for that? And he's like, yeah, I never thought about that. And so there's all these great conversations happening. You're listening to Joshua Michael, Noncompliant America. You guys, make sure to go to noncompliantamerica.com or follow me on X at noncompliantaf. We got more news coming up with the BRICS. What's going on in the economy? Right back.
It's time to unmask the truth and expose the lies. The occupied forces do not want you to hear this broadcast. Breaking through the censorship and delivering raw, unedited content. It's Joshua Michael with Non-Compliant America.
All right, folks, welcome back. Second segment. So I want to get into a couple different things. I know we always talk about preparedness and different things. So Mike Adams, the health ranger, I always follow him. He's got so much content, so much information. And he is probably the ultimate prepper guy, thinking 5, 10, 15 steps ahead in a lot of the infrastructure that he's doing. So he's been working on for years something called it's a P2P app, a point-to-point app. And this is really interesting because I think it's something that everybody should do. So you can go to Brighteon, it's brighteon.io, and I think there's a slash. Oh yeah, and then you can go /applications. And what this is it's kind of confusing, so I don't want to over-complicate it. But it's a desktop application, and you can also download it on your phone. And what it is it's for censorship resistance. And so I don't want to get into the weeds of, how the internet works and what validates websites and makes them, load on your page and stuff like that. But basically there's something called a DNS, which is a registry kind of system. And what this is this is an alternate DNS system. And this is a preparation thing that you can do for the possibility of an internet kill switch. So if they kill the internet, all of a sudden all communications are going to be down because cell phone towers, what do they connect to? They connect to the internet. Everything connects to a fiber optic somewhere that goes to Portland, then it goes to Seattle, then it interconnects between all the major hubs across the world. And they all go to a server mine somewhere, a data center that registers your website and downloads the information that you want so you can see it, right? But he's got a system, so you can go to brighteon.io /applications, install it and create a free account, and then follow the Health Ranger account. The Brighteon.io platform does not need a DNS function. Now, what is a DNS? I don't want to get into it, but that allows websites to operate. This will work in nuclear wars as long as the IP traffic is still functioning. So if the lines still work, then this will work and allow to get emergency messages through. So this is another element that you can do to prepare and put in your toolbox for the what ifs. Because we don't know what's going to happen. I know last night, my phone, it would not work for the life of me. I'd reset it. I had full bar service. I had all this stuff, and it just wasn't working. Now, it could be a fluke, could be my phone. I drop it all the time, so could be related to that. But it also could be related to other things. It could be related to them testing it. If you look back, I think it was in 2011, Google actually shut down the internet in the middle of the night, and they ran a test, and nobody actually really talked about it. It wasn't a big thing, but they were testing kind of their infrastructure because they owned, at the time, so much of that. Now it's Amazon servers, AWS, and Microsoft that have these big government database contracts, things like that. So that's one thing that you can do. Download this Brighteon app, and that eliminates the need for the DNS servers to register your website. And it'll go what's called peer-to-peer. And so that helps. Another thing is if you can find the direct IP addresses to these websites, which every website has what's called an IP address, and you can put that into your browser. You can find all your news sites and communication sites that you like, and find the IP address and just bank that. Put that in your notes. Put that in a notepad on your computer so you can reference directly to these servers with the IP address. And I know that might sound really complicated in some ways, but those are some things that you can do to prepare so that when communication gets shut down, you have alternative ways to still sift through the internet and get information, because we are in an information war. The war is now going kinetic in the sense that all these operations that they've been planning on and preparing for a Trump victory, they're now starting to initiate. And one of those things is talking about Israel bombing Iran leading up to the election to create the distraction, to create a wartime president, wartime powers, and basically plummet this country into absolute chaos. Now, one of the things and one of the reasons kind of behind all of this, not just the Trump victory, but also the economy and how much we're propped up. A lot of charts show that, we're 4 times the bubble size than we were in 2008. And at any given moment, you can see silver is skyrocketing, and I think it's up almost $2, in the past week and a half. It's been teetering, 34 to 35. It even broke 35, went up to like 35, 33, I think, was the highest. And it's just been sitting and hanging out at $34, which that's gone up over 6% in the past couple weeks, which is phenomenal. But what does that signify? That signifies the collapse and break of the dollar. So in that, the BRICS nations just finished their meeting this last week. And a couple key points I want to highlight. The Indian Prime Minister held a meeting with the new Iranian president to discuss relationships and affairs. That is a huge, huge moment. Now, what is the BRICS nations? It's set up, it's allowed, since the petrodollar's been killed in July 13th, the petrodollar died, and Saudi Arabia didn't renew it, which required all these countries and allowed the United States sanctions to operate because everybody needs crude, everybody needs gas, everybody needs energy. So the only way they could trade energy is with the US dollar. Well, that is now gone because it wasn't renewed. It was a 50-year agreement or 60-year agreement, and they didn't renew it. So what's going to happen is now you're having other countries not needing the US dollar, and therefore the sanctions that we put on these countries are no longer effective because they can use alternative forms of currency. And the BRICS nations is part of getting out from under the thumb of the United States, which is going to create a massive amount of turmoil in our economy, and all the stronghold that we've essentially had on the world is now up for grabs. And who's coming after it? It's China. Be right back.
If the road were easy, everyone would take it. We don't shy away from challenges. We dive in. And now, live from an undisclosed location in FEMA Region 10, it's your host, Joshua Michael.
All right, welcome back, folks. We're going to want to talk about the economy. I know everybody's talking about this Trump, Joe Rogan podcast, and it blew up the internet. It was great. It was nice to listen to. I think he sat down for about 3 hours. It was pretty remarkable to see, the two kind of collaborate and talk about things. They dove into some serious issues. If you don't follow Trump and follow what's actually said and what's done, then, I definitely suggest you guys watch that. It's interesting. Now, it'd be interesting to see when the polls come out this coming week, how much that has actually had an effect. I really would have liked to have seen Kamala on Rogan. I think that would have been powerful. So, get into the economy. Donald Trump tells Rogan that he's very serious about abolishing the income tax. Now, as you know, in the history of this country, we didn't have the income tax prior, I think, to 1913, if I remember correctly. And prior to that, everything was based on tariffs. And tariffs were, a pretty remarkable piece of what made the success, but it also helped mitigate some of the immigration and things like that. So with that, if you come to this country and you want to, you're a corporation, you come to this country, you want to set things up. But listen to what Donald Trump says to Joe Rogan on his podcast last night about the federal income tax. Take a listen.
Did you just float out the idea of getting rid of income taxes and replacing it with tariffs?
Well, okay.
Were you serious about that?
Yeah, sure. But why not? Because ready? Our country was the richest relatively in the 1880s and 1890s. A president who was assassinated named McKinley. He was the tariff king. He spoke beautifully of tariffs. His language was really beautiful. We will not allow the enemy to come in and take our jobs and take our factories and take our workers and take our families unless they pay a big price. And the big price is tariffs. And he'd speak like that, but he was right. And then around in the early 1900s, they switched over stupidly to, frankly, an income tax. And you know why? Because countries were putting a lot of pressure on America. We don't want to pay tariffs. Please don't. Believe me, they control our politicians. If you look at the kind of numbers that these guys make then and now, but we had a commission meeting in I think it was 1887. Think of this problem. We were so rich. We had so much money. We didn't know what to do. So they set up a blue ribbon commission on tariffs. And the sole purpose is what to do with all the money we had. We were so rich because we were taxing other people for coming in and taking our jobs.
So there you go. So that is ginormous. And if he didn't have a target on his back already, that's the type of thing and the reason why they don't want Trump in office is things like that. Common sense policies, really diving in to the infrastructure of the robbery and deception that's been happening from the U.S. government onto the indoctrination of our citizens for decades. Think about this. Little over 100 years ago, you did not pay income taxes. You didn't pay income taxes. Now, what's that going to do? I don't know all the details, but I will tell you the tariff thing is a great idea, and it worked. We had tariffs on the country longer than we had the income tax since the establishment of this country. So obviously it worked before. Other countries do it. Other countries operate that way. You go into China, it's the same thing. They won't let you just set up a corporation over there and build everything. They're going to tax you. They're going to tariff you in order to do that if you want to bring goods into their country. Now, it's a common practice, but just somehow the United States has become so corrupt, and these people have basically been selling off all of our fruits and our labor that we don't realize that multi-generationally we have been inducted into the concept of income tax. But think of what that would do for your life if you no longer had to pay income tax and you got full paychecks. Now you ask yourself, Josh, well, how are we going to pay for the government? It all comes from the tariffs. But what that'll also do is potentially there'll be less money coming into the federal government. So that's going to force them from overspending and overextending these agencies and start having to make massive cuts in these agencies, which would drastically shrink the federal government, which we need. Because you see the incompetence with the FBI. We see the incompetence with CISA. We see the incompetence with all these federal agencies. You know, they're checking in on these cyber threats, right? And they're able to breach the telecom networks. These groups are managing crisis. They're managing it for personal gain. They're managing it to leverage it and try to exploit whatever type of crisis comes about. They want to exploit it, get on top of it, make sure all their people, i.e. the Democrats and some of the Republicans, are able to get out of either the stock market or get out of the whatever leverage point that they're in to maximize gain for their own personal benefit. They're not looking out for you. They're not looking out for your best interest. The FDA does not care about the health and safety and wellness of your child. They don't care that they're still putting fluoride in the water. Even though they've come out and they've said it's bad, it's still getting in there. The toxic waste that they're dumping into the city municipality water supplies, they're still doing it. They don't care about you. They authorized the COVID vaccine for babies, 6 months old. They don't care. So you want to talk about defund the police all day. You want to talk about all this stuff. How about defund the federal government? Down to where they're just managing the border, managing security. Little to no oversights. Leave that up to the states. Create a free open market system. You know, like what's happening in California. Everybody's leaving California. You know why? Because they have too much oversight. There's too much bureaucracy. You can't build anything. Everything's overpriced. It's expensive. It's being taxed in every single account. And we're seeing the same thing in Oregon. Oregon has the same exact blueprint that's happening in California. So does Washington. And we have the corrupt election system. We've been doing mail-in ballots for over 35 years. Have we seen any progress happen? Do we see anything good happening in this state? Or is it a continuation of a downward spiral of hell and tyrannical systems with corrupt bureaucrats and politicians that are simply running our lives into the ground and taxing the hell out of everything that we do and bullying everybody? So naturally, the market, fortunately, we have other states in this union where people are leaving states like California and Oregon in droves. My buddy sold his house here. It was a very, very, mediocre house, nothing special, everything else. But, he sold it here and he bought 20 acres and this Victorian, beautiful place in Tennessee for the same price that he had this house. That's because they're giving houses away. They're giving all of these government subsidies. They're giving it away to everybody, and then they're taxing people that are here. Marion County wants to give me a permit or have me issue a permit for this carport thing that I put in my backyard. This tiny little box carport. It's not even attached to the ground. They're like, oh, you need a permit for that. They sent me all this to cease and just harassed me for a while. Eventually, they dropped it because they knew that I wasn't going to put up with that crap. But it's just constant bullying, taxes. You don't actually own your house. You could pay your house off. You don't ever own it. You know why? Because they still tax it. And there's a alternative tax assessor that decides how much money you pay. Doesn't matter if you own your house or you bought your house for $1. They're going to make the assessment of what your property is valued at. And you can't argue with it. And you have to pay that for the rest of your life. And guess what? You don't pay it, you lose your house. So things like taking away the income tax, do you know how catastrophic that would be for the system and the infrastructure? Think about this. Go look at your year-over-year paychecks, or your W-2 or W-4. I don't know which one it is you get at the end of the year. Look at that and look at all the money that you pay in taxes. Imagine having that extra money every month to pay down your debt and to pay down your bills and potentially make investments. This is going to be huge. But notice how he said that McKinley got assassinated. Who is the other person trying to eliminate the Federal Reserve and potentially the income tax? JFK, assassination. Who set up the greenbacks in the 1860s? The greenbacks, which were competing directly with the central banking system. Abraham Lincoln, assassinated. So you see this common theme here. So let's not get caught up in this race war, BS, Democrats versus Republicans, blah, blah, blah. It's all a distraction. The reality is Trump is going after the heart of these people, and that's why they're doing everything that they can to try to stop the resurgence of America, because they need a global system to control the world. Be right back.
Me and my buddy, we working hard for this money.
All right, welcome back, folks. Josh from Michael Not Compliant America. Make sure to follow me on X at NotCompliantAF. Follow the recent breaking news, everything going on in the world. It's very important. You know, and one of the big things I want you guys to get out of this podcast, out of the show, is, you know, how to prepare yourself, how to assert your will within your life and to take control of your life again. Because that is the animated contest of liberty. That is the American way and the American system. And I have to say, I don't care, you know, what kind of happens in this election, everything else. The sleeping giant is now awake. And, you know, it might be 5 years, might be 10 years at the most. But I don't see that this New World Order system that they're trying to put in place, I don't see it happening at this point. Too many people are awake. Too many people are charged up. And we're going to see it drastically in this election where there's a huge spike. The red mirage nonsense that they try to hoax us in and all this stuff stating that, you know, Trump's going to lose or he's barely going to lose. And it's always barely. But I don't think people are getting hoaxed anymore. Even if people think their vote doesn't matter, which I don't think that people think that anymore, and we've done a very good job at understanding that's the real power. And if you really break down real elections and the amount of people that actually vote, it's pretty small. It's pretty small, believe it or not. But I think this year, everybody's now realizing, especially with what happened with 2020, and you see Project Veritas or James O'Keefe from OMG Media, it's not Project Veritas anymore, and the amount of exposure that they've done with the election fraud. They had somebody undercover just recently that just dropped, and I want to talk about that, and they're fighting back against the election fraud system. There's been some successes, there's been some L's, you know, where the federal government is actually ordering the illegals back on the ballot, the box, the voter rolls, even though they managed to validate the fact that there's illegals voting. But they're still letting it happen. But you can't let that distort your God-given right to vote. And that's why it's so important to vote. No matter what, even if you think that your vote doesn't count, vote anyway. And I think most people get that now. Most people are not drinking the Kool-Aid thinking that their vote doesn't count and they don't matter and they're just a number. If you believe that, you become that. But people aren't believing that anymore. And that is the most beautiful thing that is happening all across this country, is we're getting off of our behinds and starting to walk. We're starting to stand and we're starting to run. And we're not backing down. We're not moving. We're actually pushing the enemy back, which is why they're panicking so much, which is why they've tried to assassinate our president 2 times that we know of. I believe it's more than that. And they're trying to assassinate his character. They're trying to go after his family. They're trying to go after his businesses. They're going after anybody and everybody around them. They're going after Alex Jones. They're trying to take his name. Now they're going after Elon Musk. They're not going to stop. But we aren't going to stop either. And that's why they have to do something so catastrophic. And they have to figure out a way to circumvent the resurgence of the American spirit right now. Could be happening at any moment. But even their plans are getting subverted. We got whistleblowers leaking things all the time. You know, they don't have the same cloak and dagger organizations and all this gray area nonsense. Because we're creating transparency. We're asking questions. We're getting in their face. I know the Secretary of State's office in Oregon got so many phone calls. I think this was on Oregon Live. They got so many phone calls from all these Trump supporters asking why Trump isn't in the pamphlet that they turned off their phones. Now, is that legal? I don't know. Technically, we all have redress of grievances. But that shows the power of getting involved and getting activated. But it also demonstrates the fact that we aren't backing down at all. In fact, they're on their heels. They're running scared. I got a clip. I don't know if I want to play it. At the Kamala Harris rally yesterday, she had Beyonce show up, and everybody thought everybody was there because it was a free rally. They thought they were going to go see a Beyonce concert because that's what they did with Hillary Clinton. That's what they do. Notice all these celebrities that are now all of a sudden endorsing Kamala. All these celebrities except Mel Gibson. If you haven't seen that, he said Kamala's got an IQ of a fence post. Pretty hilarious. But all these celebrities are piling on. What's interesting is most of these celebrities are directly connected to Diddy and the whole situation, if you don't know what's going on with that, the connection with the Epstein list. Seems to be all these people, Bill Gates, Eminem, Beyonce, Jay-Z, all these directly affiliated people with Diddy and Hollywood. Since when do people from Hollywood, is anybody actually listening to these people being like, oh, Beyonce like Kamala, I'm going to vote for her? Maybe a low IQ voter that doesn't have internet. But most people are seeing through this garbage. And all these paid people that are going to these rallies, everything else, it's just so pathetic. But, you know, they have the right to endorse whatever candidate they want. Do I think it's sincere? No. You know, Leonardo DiCaprio, do I think it's sincere that he goes on and bashes Trump, supports Kamala Harris, says it's, you know, one of the most important elections in the world for climate change? He's the climate change czar. So all these people are jumping on and trying to do that, but it's not working. Because the elitist Hollywood cabal, people are done with them. They don't care. Which is why you have all these Christian, you know, movie films coming out, such as Unsung Hero. If you haven't seen that movie, it's amazing. It's a great movie. Good to watch with your family. It's very inspiring. It's very God-fearing, and it's focused on the relationship that this family has with God. Powerful. But it beat out the box office. That's where people are going. So that's the most beautiful thing, is the cleansing from these demonic entities. I think COVID really, they overstepped when they initiated COVID. And that caused a lot of people to wake up, and it's a beautiful thing. And I will just say right here on the air right now, no matter what happens, no matter what happens in the world, no matter what happens next week, tomorrow, today, anything that might go on, I'm very proud, and thank you guys very much for listening to this broadcast and, you know, giving me a voice and giving me the ability to tell you what's going on in the world. And I love you. And I love you guys as listeners, and I'm just so grateful for being able to do this opportunity in this most crucial time, and I'm happy to be a part of this planet and be on this earth while literally the new digital tyrannical system is trying to uncloak itself, and we are giving it a run for its money. Because the best success that we can have in fighting against this system is to not participate and participate with your dollar, enrich your connection with God, and inspire the people around you, and encourage your family, and grow up to have good, strong, young men and women. And we don't have to fall in line with this garbage. We don't have to consume their crap that's trying to corrupt our minds. Thank you guys very much for listening. Joshua Michael, Noncompliant America. Have a great week, and we'll see you next week.